welcome. Hi, Lawrence. Hi, Barbara. Hello.
Yeah. Yes, hello, Sole. How are you? Hello, Federica. How are you?
Hello.
Hi, good morning, afternoon.
Very nice to see you. Hola, Barbara. Hi.
Hola. Hello, how are you?
How are you?
Good. I got a flu in the last days, but apart from that, everything is fine.
Oh, no. It seems to be happening everywhere in the world, eh? People getting seasonal flu or some kind of influenza or something.
Something. Yeah, I will call it something.
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly. And how are you doing, Lawrence?
Myself, I'm doing well. We have quite a nice in Uganda. It's a mix of sunshine and some rainfall, and yeah, it's nice. It takes away a few 3 months back. It was very hot, but now it's cool. We have rains that are cooling it down. So I'm very well. And sorry to Barbara about the flu. Sorry.
Yeah, it's been more than 10 days. I don't know what to do with it. And I sing, I have a concert this weekend. I don't know how I'm going to do that.
Oh,
It's terrible.
Sorry.
oh gosh.
Yes.
I think it's maybe allergic.
I think other colleagues will be joining soon as we go. So we're going to start respecting time and the fact that you've joined on time, obviously. So just a quick reminder, and I think for you too, it's a very easy reminder because you naturally do it anyways, which is to show up and learn and share your voice and participate. And we will continue to work in applying the different concepts and ideas to our practical case studies. I think we have someone new joining us today. Hello. Hi, Naran Mandak. Naran Mandak. Am I pronouncing your name properly? Welcome. Can you hear us? Not sure if she can hear us. Okay, let us know when you're ready. And maybe Fede, if you can text her to see whether she's able to hear us, that would be great. We've got Diane here. Hi. Connecting. Well, as Diane connects, I think she knows already as well the principles, so we can move on. And we're going to do a one breath check-in today, and as we do normally. And the question offered today is, what thought or feeling are you bringing with you to this session today? And it might be something that you're still, ruminating or digesting from a previous meeting or early this morning, or something that happened to you personally, or something that you saw, anything. So what thought or feeling are you bringing with you to this session today? And maybe let's start with Lawrence.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I think my thoughts today are, I think all through these sessions, I've come to learn so many things, and the broader guided sessions, especially the videos that we had before this session were good. And I believe I can take a bit on things that I can bring into the work that I'm doing, and possible takeaways of other things I can learn. So that's what I come with today. So I would like then to call Barbara. You are the first one with me here to share. Yes, please.
Well, the thoughts that I have, I don't know, in the last days, the last weeks, I've been very much reflecting about inclusion and in different projects. And I think it's really nice, you know, to come to this conclusion that this is really the one of the issues that really have to be discussed and to be understood. And one of the I don't know, one of the observation that I had during these different occasions when I'm discussing about this topic is that when we give time to people, when we create a friendly environment, just not to talk, you know, sometimes when you don't talk and we are together, it helps a lot. So yeah, I think this you know, this time of freezing the moment and being together, looking to each other, is a good step to start and to discuss further. Yeah, that's what I would like to do.
I think she took like 3 breaths. She did not use one.
That's okay. We can take multiple breaths today because we are a small group. So
shall I try with the Naramahantak Batar? I don't know if she's there, but if you are there, please take the floor.
yeah. Oh, yes, there you are. Hi, welcome.
Hello, everyone. My name is Narmada. I'm from GCA funded project. I'm a safeguarded special gender specialist. I'm sorry I'm new here, so I'm going to learn a lot from you guys.
Oh, fantastic. How shall we call you? Naran
Or just simply Manda.
Manda.
Yes.
Manda. Okay, perfect. Manda. Thank you so much for joining us. And we are doing something called One Breath Check-in, which is a practice about showing up and sort of landing in the session, sharing where you're at, or in response to a question that we offer for that. And the question is, what thought or feeling are you bringing with you to this session today?
Mm-hmm.
Anything you would like to share about that question at this point?
Not really right now. I'm sorry.
That's okay, no worries. Whereabouts are you based, Manda?
In Mongolia.
Mongolia, perfect.
Yes.
And sorry, which organization did you say you were joining from?
I'm joining from UNDP and the GCF project.
Ah, perfect. Yes, GCF
Yes.
project. Very well, thank you and welcome. We've had some colleagues from Mongolia joining other sessions of the deep dive in the past. So we can connect you with them as well to just share some of the learnings and practices that we do. Over to you, Fede.
Thank you, Sole. So what I'm bringing this morning, to be honest, I am still like in the waking up phase because it's 9 a.m. but I am not used to have let's call them early calls, because as Sole knows, we work mainly in the afternoon, who is based in Europe, from our team. But I'm bringing with me positive feelings. I had a good sleep, which is great. So yeah, over to you, Sole.
Thank you very, very much. And I'm bringing, I would say, two different feelings. One is of excitement and happiness, because I love these sessions and these groups, and how throughout the weeks and the modules we create that sort of sense of safe space. And what you said, Barbara, really really touched me, because it is a lot about this idea of creating a friendly environment and being able to pause and look at each other and really sort of treasure this kind of spaces for connection. And related to that, to human connection, I'm also bringing in a little bit of sense of overwhelm, because before joining this call, I was driving back from a meeting that I had, and I was listening to a session or a podcast actually from an expert on AI, artificial intelligence, which you know is the topic of the moment. And yeah, and I feel it's a topic that to me it's quite overwhelming at the moment, with all of this sort of apocalyptic views of it, and very, you know, uncertain perspectives. So yeah, and the podcast didn't finish. I didn't manage to finish listening to it, but I had to stop at the point in which the person that was running the podcast asked the interviewee, who was an ex-vice president of Google, and you know, these are AI guys, what is the one thing that AI hasn't cracked yet? Or where are humans going to still add value in the context of AI? And the guy's response was human connection. You know, that's the one thing that still we get to keep for ourselves, basically. So yeah, so it all connects, I think, to what you were mentioning and to today's session. So thank you very much for offering your insights and your feelings and thoughts. Manda, just to share that we are going to cover gender a little bit today. So it's a fantastic opportunity to have you here today and listen to your experience and thoughts on that. But just to give you a quick overview, Manda, but also the rest, a quick reminder of what we've done so far. So this is session number 3 of 4. On session 1, we talked about the key elements of effective collaborative action. We talked about 3 key ideas around systems leadership, thinking, and change. And the 3 key ideas were basically that we operate in complex systems, particularly in food and agriculture, but in sustainable development in general, actually. And multi-stakeholder collaborative processes operate in complex systems and are a complex system in itself. Then that leading in complexity requires a very specific type of leadership, which is not linear, but actually having this more holistic perspective and trying to connect the dots and bringing different voices to the table so that we can have a better understanding of and more comprehensive understanding of the ecosystem that we are working on, because no single organization or individual can actually grasp the whole. And then the third idea was around leverage points, which is when we work with complex systems, rather than thinking about problems and solutions as, you know, general overviews of there's a problem and here there's a solution, we talk about leverage points, which are those aspects of the system, those points that, if changed, have the capacity to really transform the current situation. And when we think about food and agricultural commodity systems, we talk a lot about what are those leverage points, what's the difference that's going to make the difference, right? Then we talked about how complexity looks in practice from a case study, applying complexity principles to the Ugandan cattle corridor, systems level assessment from a project called Scala. And we did a practical application. So each person chose a specific project, work, intervention to start applying effective collaborative action. And we did some exercises on identifying challenges, complexities, and leverage points in your individual case studies. So that was session 1. And then session 2, we talked about collaboration and working with power. So we talked about what good collaboration means for us. What does it look like? We talked about 4 agendas and the CALM acronym: connect, align, learn, and make, so take action. We talked about the 10 key principles of effective collaborative action. And then we talked about, okay, we created in the session this vision of what good collaboration can be for us, our shared understanding of that. And then we moved into what gets in the way of good collaboration in practice. And so we looked at limiting conditions, and we also looked at how does progress manifest or look like in multi-stakeholder collaborative processes through the early signals of change. Yeah, and you've received a handout with all of the 10 key principles and the different limiting conditions, tools and practices that you can apply to move forward in that particular principle, and early signals of change, examples of those early signals of change that can help identify change. Then we talked about the 3 key ideas of working with power. So we talked about power is neither good nor bad, and we talked about different framings of power, and all of this is in the videos as well. So Manda, if you want to have a look at those videos in your own time after this session, there's videos from session 1 and 2 that very short videos that share all of these key ideas. We did an exercise on privilege, and we talked about how working with power starts with ourselves and developing our own understanding and awareness of how power dynamics manifest in multi-stakeholder collaborative processes. And then we talked about how facilitating collaboration is mostly about navigating through power dynamics. And we looked at the power concentrations in the food supply chain in Netherlands as just an example to illustrate this. And then obviously we did the practical application where we looked at mapping the limiting conditions and early signals of change for your personal case study and identifying power dynamics. So session 1, session 2, now we are into session 3, which we are going to focus on inclusion, effective communication, and collaborative innovation practices. So, and then last session next week is going to be more around facilitation and the sort of train the trainers aspect of this program. And that's going to be our last module. And then we're going to have, in a couple of months from now, the alternative to participating in follow-up sessions, meet other people that have already done this program in the past, and sort of create this alumni network of effective collaborative action. Any questions or comments so far? Anything that you would like to share, maybe Lawrence or Barbara, from the previous sessions for Manda?
Yeah, of course. Especially, I'd like to allude a lot to the last sessions on power. Is that so many a time, especially as people with responsibilities, sometimes lead workers on projects. Sometimes we, without the opportunity to get through such sessions, sometimes you do not know how far you can use your power, or how your superiors are using their power on you. And I'm working on a project, on a rapid banana project that is working with banana multiplication companies and working in the ecosystem of how they take the seeds down to the farmers. And there were lots of power challenges that I found before I came on to this part-time role. And these power challenges, especially from the organization funding the work locally, were driving organizations away from this. So my responsibility was to look at creating a gap, or where we would analyze what are the challenges, and these people had gotten a lot of frustration because of the power application by the donor representative. And then I came in to kind of be the center space where I take the pressure and then limit what goes down to the grantees. And so many organizations that were getting off started coming back. So it reflected a lot in what I had done, and also helped me further on any other projects I get on, how to control and ensure that situations remain normal in terms of people holding power and those they are working with. That's what I had to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Lawrence, and super interesting that you're sharing your experience. I'm wondering if we can follow up on that maybe bilaterally and have like a little recording of your experience so that we can share it with others, because it is super relevant. And one of the things that we talked about, Manda, around power is that we recognize that it is an area that we are still developing, you know, in terms of how to best address power dynamics. And it is an area that really, it's a huge leverage point and a huge bottleneck as well. So all of these learnings, if we can capture people's experiences and what seems to work, and it's really fundamental to share with other practitioners, you know, within UNDP and outside, of course. So
sure.
Yeah, thank you. And Barbara, anything from your side that you would like to share from the previous sessions that you think is relevant for Manda and for all of us, obviously?
I will not extend more. I agree with Lawrence. I think it's fantastic that people in the field can tell us their experiences and their struggles, and that we can discuss together. Because it's true that sometimes when you have a case in front of you and you are not dealing with it closely, you don't see a lot of elements, you see. And thanks to this methodology and the discussion we are having, I think we can go deeper. And that is really amazing. I'm very happy about it. And also the fact that I think you are offering also a continuity, so to become friends and to continue discussing to help each other. It's exactly what we need, you know. We need to really discuss openly and really to with our experiences and knowledges to share and see what we identify and continue. It's a continuous process. So I will leave it here, but I very much appreciate it.
Thank you, Barbara. Thank you very much. And Manda, please feel free to let us know if you want to say anything, or if you have any questions. Or if there's anything that you would like to share, just feel free to raise your hand on Zoom and let us know if and whenever you're ready to participate.
Okay, I don't have a question right now.
Thank you. Good. So today we're going to talk about a few key ideas around gender and social inclusion. We're going to talk about for gender and social inclusion, we're going to talk about very fundamental, basic principles, which might seem quite obvious in a way and quite simple, but at the same time, I feel it's actually really important to go back to those basics sometimes and really discuss whether we have a shared understanding of those fundamental principles. And then again, Manda, you know, the invitation, given that you do work on gender, for you to share your experience with us, that would be fantastic, to the extent that you feel comfortable doing so. Then we're going to talk about effective communication. Then we're going to do some practice work on our own case studies. And we're going to look at applying also the ECA components, the effective collaborative action components, to our case studies through the guiding questions, which there were some videos about this, if you managed to have a look at those before our session today. So we're going to start on the gender and social inclusion, some of the key ideas on this. Since we are a small group, we have the opportunity and the advantage to be able to hear from each other rather than go into breakout groups. So I think that's a fantastic opportunity for us to leverage on. And the first thing, so forget about the pair check-in, we can do this conversation together. The first thing that I want to bring to your attention in terms of thinking about inclusion is the concept of diversity, actually, and how do we define diversity. And one of the key flaws that we tend to see when we think about diversity is that we tend to focus a lot on the attributes of that we can see. And if you see the graphic, that's what it's called, the attributes that are above the waterline of visibility. Yeah, and what you see is what we call the diversity iceberg, which is basically an iceberg of all of the different qualities, human qualities that make us different and unique to each other. So when we think about diversity, typically, one of the flaws, as I said, is to think about diversity in terms of skin color, in terms of race, in terms of age, in terms of nationality, maybe ethnicity, maybe gender identity. But as we go down into the diversity iceberg, there are a lot of qualities and attributes that also make up for our diversity that are not very visible or as easy to identify. So, for instance, work style, beliefs, work experience, skills, sexual orientation, learning style, family status, personality profile. Well, language, obviously, it's a little bit more visible to a certain extent, political views. So all of this makes, all of these attributes make up for how we understand diversity, and not just gender, ethnicity, race, or age, which are the typical ones. And so in order to bring this to life a little bit more, the proposal is to have a very brief conversation, maybe amongst the 5 of us in this extended check-in. And the trigger question is, what do people see or presume about you? And what wouldn't they know or expect based on what they see? Yeah, so we're trying to connect the waterline of visibility with what's underneath. And of course, share to the extent that you feel comfortable doing so. And the other question is, what positive or negative experiences have you had because of your own diversity? Again, to the extent that you are comfortable sharing. So, who would like to go first?
You have been calling me to go first most of the time, so let me go first again. Yeah. Yes. So yeah. So number one, personally, so many times, I mean, when people look at me, I grew up a small boy, very small, and then became bigger after. So when so many people look at me now, they think, he's been big all the time. I was these kinds of that. They would beat on all the time because I was a small boy, and then became big through my university time. And then number two, of course, I would also like to say, because I'm a double tribe person, I am born here in Uganda. When you come to the central, that's the Baganda tribe, where it's more diverse. And then the southwestern tribe is where my mother is from. So my father is from the central, my mother is from the western. And so I mostly look like a Westerner when someone sees me at face value. So and because I grew up in the West, even my language, when I speak like Westerners. So every time, ever since I came to the Central for study and work, every time I introduce myself with a Central person's name, I have to explain myself. It's clear and outward. You have to explain why, how did it come about, and so on. So it's something that I've grown up with, that I never have to complain about, because when the people look at me, they see a Westerner, and then your name is a central name, and then so basically you have to explain yourself all over. And yeah, so and then a bit of my work, I have less of my background of study in agriculture, but since 2018 I've been working in the agriculture sector, and I am happy and lucky to have spent, I spend like around 75% of my time in the field. And because of that time in the field, I have learned agriculture and speak agriculture more than things that I've studied. So people always say, okay, so what did you study? And then when they say, what did you study? Then it's a very, very big challenge. How come? Because I have learned agriculture, and because of the work, like I've said, like working now on Rapid Banana project, it's going to end soon, but I've spent a lot of time on understanding the banana value chain, and now I explain it like I studied it. So, but every time someone asks you, okay, what did you study? Then I studied procurement and logistics management, and then it's like, what? How come? How did you get all this? But all that is the benefit of my work in the field, my work where the agriculture is happening, that I've come to become so good about it. And so that's what I would like to share. And then I would also like to add that I'm at my workplace, I'm also a gender focal person, and I am doing my master's on a thesis on gender equality and the share of agricultural proceeds at smallholder household level. So I'm also doing some work in the gender space. Yes, thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Lawrence. That's amazing. And thank you for sharing about your background, giving us also some context around the different cultural backgrounds in Uganda, your experience. That's amazing. Thank you for your generosity. Really, really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Manda, is there anything that you would like to share in response to these questions of your experience in?
Well, I have my personal experience in overseas, because when I was in Japan, people are always asking me weird questions, as like, how do you can you ride a horse, or do you have cattle in your home, and how do you know how to use internet? And then so basically these were like really personal racial questions I had heard from my teenagers. So I just and then now I'm working on the UNDP project as a safeguards and gender officer. Mostly I focus on environmental safeguards, so and the social safeguards. So we have now I want to ask now we are facing the social inclusion plan, because in our project area, because some of even we have Mongolian nationality, some of our people are from Kazakh background, so they are different, have different language, different religion, and also some customs are generally little bit different than us. So I want to know about how we are going to include those, Kazakh people to include our beneficiary of the project.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Manda. And Uchi, welcome. How are you? So nice to have you here today. Can you hear us? Well, we'll follow up with Uchi. Ah, yeah, there you are. Yes.
Yes, I can hear you. I can hear you. I can hear you. Yes, good morning.
Good morning.
Yes, good morning. Let me on my.
That's
Yes.
okay. How are you?
Yes.
Are you okay to share, or are you busy at the moment and better for you to focus on driving or something else?
I've stopped. If I've sorry, I've dropped somebody. Yes. Then when I've reached home, when I reach to house about just 2 minutes, I will now come up and express myself.
Take your time. No worries. It's very nice to have you here and see you again. So don't worry.
Yeah, I will connect on Bluetooth, and
yes.
I will be hearing you people. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Hi,
Yes.
Elizabeth. Welcome. Very nice to have you joining us today.
Hi, how are you?
We're very well, thank you. We're just doing a check-in on diversity and the diversity iceberg. So we'll finish that and then we'll continue and invite you, of course, whenever you want and are ready to share your perspectives. Barbara, what about you? What's your experience of the diversity iceberg and the questions?
Actually, what Lauren said, it resonates with me as well. I don't know why all my life I have difficulties to choose my career because I am curious about many things. And for me, it's not one way. So I study law, but I don't feel like a lawyer. So as you can see in my career, I was working on human rights and the right to water and sanitation. And then I understood that I want to apply what the law says because, and then I also before I did my master's in businesses also because I felt very close to business. So you see, when people ask me, who are you? I have difficulties to explain who I am. Because, as I said, I would like to be a person who helps rather than who says, but I would like to have this knowledge of, so the legal knowledge is quite interesting, it's quite strong. So I use my lenses, but I don't like to be introduced as a lawyer because I don't feel as a lawyer myself. So I'm a person who wants to evolve together with other partners and see where we get rather than to come with my mandate or my approach, you see. So the same is when they ask me, where do you come from? What is your nationality? I'm Spanish, but, I've been living in Switzerland for more than 10 years. I lived in London before. So, yes, I love my country, but I don't feel only Spanish, you see. So I have difficulty sometimes to define myself with the type of questions people use. And I think instead of giving me a space to explain myself, they limited me somehow. So I need to have in front of me a person who is willing to listen and who is willing to understand. Otherwise, I will feel frustrated. So that's what I can share with you.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Barbara. Thank you for sharing. Fede, anything that you would like to share from your own sense making of the questions?
Thank you, Sole, and everyone. And yes, it's very interesting, this conversation. I would like to, connect also to what Lawrence said about his childhood or adolescence phase, and then, growing up. Well, that didn't happen to me. So I'm very small. And this is usually like the first comment and impression that everyone has, which is like, okay, you are breaking the ice, I'm used to it, but in a way you are kind of defining me based on the way I look like. So yeah, this is like something that happened quite often. And also in a way similar to what Barbara said, but still I don't have the answer about who am I still, I'm still in the phase of finding out that I am a sociologist. I define myself as a sociologist, but now I'm doing a master on computational social science. So I'm also a data scientist right now. I'm a mixed of background, but right now I am focusing also, thanks to this amazing work, also on other topics like food and ag. But actually I have an expertise more on gender segregation inequalities, school segregation inequalities, and other themes and areas. And sometimes when I'm starting talking about that, then people I think it's confusing and it can be difficult to understand, because there are many, fields playing, and usually like I'm feeling also that some people are not interested, or because of also it's hard to understand, then they shut down the conversation around it. So yeah, it's interesting to see this kind of connection. And yeah, over to you, Sole. Oh, Uchi is here.
Yes.
I can
Yes.
again. Thank you. Would you like to comment on anything?
Let me share with Uchi. Thank you, Federica, first of all, for sharing about your personal experience and your connections to the diversity iceberg. And it's so valuable it feels like we get to know really that through yours and everyone's sharing today, it becomes so clear, this idea of seeing beyond what we can see, right? Which is so powerful, I find. So Uchi, we are talking about what makes us different, basically, and how when we talk about difference, we tend to focus a lot on the things that we can see, like skin color, race, age, nationality, and we tend to focus less on the things that we don't see. So for the purposes of bringing some visibility to that to what's underneath that waterline of visibility, we are sharing, what are your thoughts from your personal experience on what do people see and presume about you, and what they wouldn't know or expect based on what they see, and what positive or negative experiences you've had because of your own diversity, and all of this, obviously, to the extent that you are comfortable sharing.
Thank you very much. This is becoming more of a family. Indeed,
Yes.
I like this meeting where people from different aspects of life, different country express and give their own experience on such a particular work. And it's very important. As you know, I'm in Nigeria, by name Dominic. At first, when I was growing up, I really have passion in agriculture because most of our people depend on agriculture for their livelihood. In Nigeria, I've come from the central
that is the North Central Nigeria, where they produce a lot of food. And in short, our state is known as the food basket of the nation, the title of the food basket of the nation, because you have every variety of food in the particular state. So I have passion for it because I saw that our people had been trying, but they have not been getting income on this food due to some of the constraints and challenges because of knowledge. You know, the first thing in life is for you to become awareness of certain aspect of it. And then when you become awareness, you practice it, the knowledge is there, the skills, and then implementation. So first of all, I have to go into agriculture in order to help my own community because I have passion. I came into university in the north in Nigeria, University of Maiduguri. That is my first degree. I led agricultural extension. After agricultural extension, I came up with 2-1. That's a second class upper, close to distinction. And then after then, there is a national youth service that a mandatory one that if you are less than 35 in Nigeria, you have to enroll on it. I did it. After then, I also enrolled in my master's again. My master was in Benue State University in rural sociology and agricultural extension. After the master's, I've picked up the challenge of enrolling into PhD program at Federal University Dutse. Yes, so I finished the classwork. I'm on the field thesis feed. I did the proposal and about to go to the field to collect the data from the participant. I'm doing something about evaluation of private extension workers on the climate change advisory services. Private extension workers simply because we have a limited number of public extension now and taking on agricultural, extending the innovation to the farmers. And in Nigeria or in Africa now, you can discover that one extension farmer in the public is covering up to 3,000 farmers. So now the charity organization, the NGO have come in to try and bridge the gap of extension. So those private extension agents, I'm looking at them, how are they coping? What are the knowledge they have? Have they know something about climate change? Because climate change is really disturbing us. I had a contract job with a GIZ on rice value chain. It has expired. So currently, I don't have job. I'm just schooling. Yes, trying to pick up myself. Although I had been online trying to find like opportunities, making connections, and the people had find my ideas and experience very worthy. That they have been going to conferences, sponsors one. I've gone to Ghana. I've gone to Senegal. Of recent, I was invited for in Italy for a conference. And yes, an ocean prediction, although my visa wasn't ready, but I did it online. I was invited. Yes, I was also invited in South Africa, but my visa delay, I did it online. So I picked passion. And what I like most is that to be very, yes, to be very frank, the Western world are really trying in order to in African countries, because all the knowledge that we are having, we derive it from the at least the Western world and their own cooperation in order to make life livable to the African country. And it's very important. It's very important. We do appreciate such a gathering like this, such meetings like this. It helps a lot. I've derived a lot of experience in co-designing, involvement of the stakeholders, and the rest of it. In my life, I believe that there are challenges whenever you want to do anything. That is why, even though I don't have job now, I have to pick up doing my PhD because I want to have experience, more experience about agriculture and the climate change. And it's helping me a lot because I have known the various perspective that people could be helped. That is, can be in kind, transfer of knowledge, and the skills acquisition really very important in life in order to help people to pick up their challenges, especially those that depend on agriculture. And I found this particular organization, this particular meeting very valuable to my own experience. And I really thank you people for involving me in this meeting and also program. Thank you.
Thank you so much for participating actively and for sharing so much about your life and your work. And please do share, if you can, more information about your PhD. If you have like the PhD proposal, anything that we can read, I'd love to read it personally. Yeah, so thank you very much. And thank you everyone for all the sharing that you've done. It's so important and relevant. I'm just going to briefly share. I'm Argentinian by origin, and I was born in Argentina a number of years ago, but I always share that I grew up in an Argentina that's a little bit different from the one that we live, that's there today. And I'm also very, very small in size. I'm quite tiny. And I was born in an Argentina that was, starting democracy after a very significant dictatorship that involved the kidnapping and disappearance of a significant number of people. And also in the aftermath of the Falklands, I wouldn't call it war because it was basically just, unfortunately, our local propaganda to try to revert the unpopularity of the undemocratic government. But I was also born in an Argentina and raised in an Argentina that was quite male dominant, very strongly male dominant. And so I had to face, as I grew up and as I studied and as I started working, a lot of challenges as a small young woman. And I think that really changed me quite deeply in my sense of safety, to the extent that I always say one of the reasons that I feel so happy here in Hong Kong, it's because it's so safe. I can walk in the streets outside day and night, and I'm not worried about, something that could happen to me, or physical aggression towards me, or harassment, which are things, unfortunately, that in Latin America at the time that I was growing up were very, very common. So yeah, all of these things really, I think, carve into our sense of selves and our experience of life. And so it's important to have the space to share how they've changed us and made us who we are. Thank you so much, everyone, for sharing. And I'm going to continue now with some other key points around diversity, these foundational ideas. We talked about the iceberg to understand diversity more broadly. The other model that I wanted to share with you is what we call, actually the friendship circle calls it the DOTS model. And the DOTS model is a graphic way of making a visual distinction between different situations that are not inclusion, and how can we therefore be more precise about the way that we understand inclusion, and also be more precise about how we understand exclusion and different ways in which exclusion or marginalization can show up. So as you can see, we've got, let's start with the bottom, we have exclusion, which you can see visually, we've got the green dots, a circle, a boundary, and then we have the rest of the color dots outside of that boundary. So exclusion is basically, people with different characteristics, different qualities that are basically separated or marginalized and not allowed to join the main group. If we move into segregation, we can see that it is a form of exclusion, but basically the difference is gathered as a subgroup outside of the main group. Yeah. So this happens many times in different countries. For instance, when it comes to ethnicity, where certain ethnic groups are basically limited to a certain area of the country, and there's conflict. So that's an example of how segregation can show up. Then we have integration, which is not inclusion, and this is an important differentiation. And integration is basically when the main group accepts another group, but those that are different stay as a subgroup within the main group. So utilizing the same example as segregation, in this case, this would be the typical cases of different ethnic groups that coexist in a city. So they are allowed to live in the same city, but they have their own communities and neighborhoods, which are quite closed, and they're not necessarily living and shopping and eating and going to the same places as people from that city, from that local community. So that's another example of, pseudo inclusion. So it's not really inclusion. Yeah, that's the point that we want to make. Then we have assimilation, which is a very common way of confusing or mistaken inclusion. And assimilation reflects the situation where people lose their difference and therefore the value that their diversity can bring, and are basically seeking to blend into the prevailing culture. So that's not inclusion, yeah? That's assimilation. It's the typical case of you're allowed to join in as long as you leave your differences at the door and you become one of us. You act like us, you look like us, you do the same things that we do, you express yourself in the same ways that we do, yeah? Finally, obviously, inclusion, as you can see, is that circle where the green dots and the color dots are all within the same group and mixed together. Yeah, so individuals are freely included and equal within a shared environment. As I said, these terms might feel quite basic and simple, but yet it's so important to go back to these fundamentals when we think about gender and social inclusion from the perspective of a multi-stakeholder collaboration. And we are going to think about and reflect about this question of how is inclusion showing up or not showing up, and whether we think inclusion is happening in our multi-stakeholder collaborative processes, but actually it might be more segregation or integration or assimilation. So, this is the idea of why we're talking about this different concepts. The other key idea that I wanted to bring to our attention was the difference between equality and equity. I don't know if you've seen this graph before, but it's also very used in the sphere of gender and social inclusion. And it's this idea of really understanding that the difference between equal and equitable, and also the difference between positive action and positive discrimination. So in the first image, as you can see, we are assuming that everyone benefits from the same support, yeah? And basically everyone is being treated equally, but that doesn't mean that everyone has the same access, as you can see, yeah? Because sometimes equal treatment doesn't lead to equal opportunities. So this is, you know, an important differentiation. And when we think about wanting to treat people fairly, then we may assume that that means treating everyone the same, which is the image number one, the equal treatment. But as I said, you know, sometimes same treatment creates unfair outcomes. And that's the image number two, when we talk about being treated equitably or equality in that sense, you know, in the sense of focusing on what each stakeholder might need to create an even play field, rather than providing everyone with the same tools and the same this access to the same things in a way. And then the third one, which is actually quite interesting, is, you know, the first one and the second one, equality and equity. As you can see, the image is about overcoming the barriers, but the third image is trying to invite us to think, you know, ultimately, in order to have equality and equity, instead of trying to overcome the barriers, maybe there's a question about what can we do to remove the systemic barriers to equality and equity altogether, you know? And so this is where positive action comes in. Basically, positive action is about giving a fair chance to get to the starting line, competing on equal terms. And positive discrimination is when the odds are stacked in favor of one group in detriment of other groups. The benefit is more intrinsically related to group membership than actual need, in a way. Yeah. So just to bring, you know, this to our awareness, when we think about multi-stakeholder collaboration, when we think about power dynamics, the actions that we are taking, are we bringing equality? Are we fostering equity? Are we trying to remove the barriers that are preventing equality and equity to happen organically? And what are the limitations to that? Because we also know that in different cultures and in different contexts, there are barriers that are not within our power to eliminate. So all of these are open questions that we need to think about when it comes to multi-stakeholder collaborative processes. The last thing I wanted to share, and this is very much connected to effective communication as well, is this idea of micro inequities. So when we think about inclusion or exclusion, we many times think about the big manifestations of exclusion, yeah? But actually, exclusion can be much more pervasive and much more subtle. And this is the idea of micro inequities and micro messaging, which are those small, subtle, semi-conscious messages that we send and receive when we interact with others, in the way that we pay attention to different people and how they talk and what they say. Non-verbal language, you know, things like someone is talking and all of a sudden you start looking at your watch, or you start looking to the other side, or, you know, all of these are called micro messages or micro inequities, because they're negative messages that people might interpret as lack of attention, lack of interest, and therefore cause people to feel devalued, slighted, discouraged, or excluded. And micro affirmations are the positive ones, the positive micro messages like looking in the eye, paying attention, nodding your head when someone is talking. These are messages that convey that we are paying attention, that we are listening, that we are valuing, and therefore making that other person or that group feel included and encouraged. So all of this, again, the invitation is for you to think about how all of this manifests and show up in the work that you do, in the collaborative processes that you run, in the sessions, in the exchanges with other stakeholders. And obviously from your own self, how do you show up in these things consciously and unconsciously? So we're now going to move into a quick 5-minute sort of individual reflection mode, because we've been obviously switched on in the conversation quite a lot, and it's good to have a little bit of downtime to do some sense making. And the invitation is to go to your personal Google Slide workspace. Manda, we have, for each participant, we have a slide deck, a Google Drive slide deck, where you can work through these questions. And the invitation is for you to think about any particular intervention, project, initiative. Doesn't have to be something big, anything where you would like to apply and use as an example to think about these concepts and ideas from your own work. Could be a meeting with someone, it doesn't have to be something huge. And so we are going to invite you to go to your personal workspaces and work through these questions of, how is gender and social inclusion and exclusion showing up in that multi-stakeholder process or that collaborative process. And again, trying to think from very visible ways like women are not allowed to lead a conversation in a multi-stakeholder setting where there are community leaders. Yeah, that's a very visible rule. And then we can think about micro inequities, ways in which different stakeholder groups are required to assimilate rather than be included, and so on and so forth. So you're going to have these questions as well as a guide. Then what are the actions and mechanisms to bring more equality and more equity that you think are already in place or that you could bring in? And then the third one is, what are the intrinsic cultural, institutional, historical barriers to enable gender and social inclusion? So cultural hierarchies, historical female roles, lack of females in the institution or in the stakeholder group. So the idea is for us to have a more comprehensive and intentional understanding of how gender and social inclusion is manifesting in that particular piece of work that you are doing. And that you chose as your case study. So the way that we're going to do that is, if I go to, here, yeah, you will see that you have the questions in a more detailed, as detailed as I've just shared in your Google slide on slide 9, and then you have the 3 questions. How is gender and social inclusion and exclusion showing up? And you have here inclusion and exclusion, equality and equity and the question, and the barriers, intrinsic barriers. You have these spaces and the sticky notes on the top to start adding your reflections, yeah? And we'll take around 5 minutes and see how far we can get. And then, as we always say, this is an open working space for you to continue developing as much as you want later on if you find it useful. So it's 12 past the hour, so let's take around 5 minutes, and around 17, 18 past the hour we will restart the conversation. Obviously, please stay on the Zoom. We will just open the space for you to work on your own project file. And please, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to share on the chat or even ask directly. If you have any trouble accessing your Google file, just simply let us know and we will help you out, or just take notes of your reflections separately. Back to the main group. And yeah, before we go to a break, I just wonder if there's any sort of reactions, quick reactions or thoughts that came to you in applying these questions to your case study that you would like to share. And obviously also from your experience, because all of you here are very knowledgeable in terms of gender and social inclusion. So I'd love to hear your thoughts as well. Barbara, would you like to start?
Yeah, I have difficulties to do the exercise, technically speaking. So I try to, but I think it's better to speak. Yeah, so one of the things that I observed during the presentation and also in my work is that terminology is not always, so people talk about inclusion, but what we mean exactly is not the same. So for instance, from a legal perspective, we talk about the principle of equality and no discrimination. It's quite important, this principle of human rights is inserted in every constitution of a country. But when it comes to understand what that means exactly, we have different versions and there is no clarity. So just to say that I think the human rights can help very much into that, because it's very much aligned what you were the definition that you described. So to really understand the causes, and then we started from there, you see. Then in my view, in my experience, just two general ideas. Inclusion is not represented in the processes. Why? Because people don't have clarity of the terms of inclusion, they don't have the knowledge to apply it. They are not invested enough from the beginning of the process, so then it will not be reflected in the cycle process. So it's really, really important to raise it at the beginning. And also, when you have people in the processes and you think that is inclusive, having the people in the space is not enough. And that's why we need to really understand that skills are also important. And as you describe it, so we need to, we need to make sure that the people who will participate are prepared to participate. And if not, I think, in my view, we have to devote a certain space to clarify those dimensions and to integrate it into the process. Yeah, that's what I would like to say for now. Thanks.
Thank you, Barbara. Fantastic tips and suggestions and experience as well. Definitely, it is something that needs to be included in the design of the process. And I love what you said about the understanding. I think it's so key, because I mean, I think we can very safely say that 90% of people are not waking up every morning thinking, how am I going to exclude or marginalize such and such person or such and such group? Yet exclusion and marginalization still happen much more than what it is intentionally done, right? And that's the gap that we need to figure out. And that is the awareness that we need to work on. How are we unintentionally excluding, unintentionally maybe creating marginalization? That's, I feel, where the working space is. because those that are excluding and marginalizing on purpose, they probably need other kinds of help in terms of figuring out why they're doing that and how to not do it, maybe in benefit of the whole system. But yeah, it's the lack of awareness where I feel we have a lot of opportunity. So thank you. Anything else that you would like to share? Maybe I don't know, Lawrence, would you like to? Yes.
Yeah, I would like to share, because you see, recently we were in a discussion about behaviors of young people in northern Uganda, and someone was saying that most of these men wake up to go beside the road and chill. Like they have sitting spaces, so they hang there all day doing nothing. And then the question was, if we are to change this, the behavior, is it right to go to these guys already chilling, whose behavior is already negative? And the reason why I'm starting from this perspective, when you look at gender equality or gender inclusion, so many people are committing to including women, but they are forgetting that it is about looking at how do we include everyone. Because if you over bring in women, then down the road, it's too many women, then you have to bring men. Because they are only looking at it from that perspective. So the issues are that even when we include the lowest actors in designing these policies or in putting together these gender inclusion measures, if in the process of including them, are we observing the power issues? Because you see, sometimes you have included them, but because of the power gaps, they are not even contributing. They are here for you to write. In the process of forming this gender policy, we included women, we included all classes of people, but they were sitting in the spaces, not involved in any of this because of the power struggles and because of the political and other issues. So it is important that in designing, in thinking about inclusion, we go further than so many of these, what the systems and what we already have is doing, because it is inclusion at face value, but not inclusion in the actual design and systematic work. So I do feel that those are important issues, and we do need to have strategies of ensuring that it's the inclusion is really inclusion, not for purposes of reporting to a donor or purposes of reporting to a superior. That's what I wanted to add.
Yeah, thank you very much, Lawrence. And so important what you're saying, so relevant. And I think the whole school of talking about gender responsive measurements comes a long way in that sense of thinking about not just women or men in those terms, but actually how do we implement practices and policies that can actually respond to the needs of different gender identities. So thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Marta, anything that you would like to share from your experience working on gender? Please, more than welcome for you to take the floor if you would like to share anything. Federica, from your side, you mentioned you had some experience on gender as well. So would you like to share anything?
Thank you, Sole. Yes, I would like to share perhaps, I mean, from mine and even from fellows, like talking about work environment, right? So, and sometimes like there are some micro inequities, or yeah, even in terms of division of tasks and roles, there is like a tendency, like perhaps to use, let's say, stereotype for like making women, for instance, like taking notes, just like daily activities, right? Or like given more like the organizational, and as also Lawrence was saying, right, like playing with the power. And of course there are like labels in the different roles, but like giving this kind of task because it is associated to the stereotype. Yeah, just wanted to share this quick comment and feedback. But yeah, thank you very much all for sharing.
Thank you, Fede. And yes, definitely these micro inequities show up in the form of work environment, day-to-day routines and practices, as well as in day-to-day interactions or in a multi-stakeholder collaboration as well. So it's good to pay attention to those. And Barbara, I can see that you unmuted yourself. Is there anything that you would like to say?
Yeah, I just wanted to share something with you that I experienced. I do electoral observation missions in countries, and I stay for some time there. And one of the dimensions I look at is gender. And what I observe is exactly what Lauren said. So sometimes we have some measures in place, but when I talk to, so for instance, last country was Gambia, and I couldn't see, effective participation of women at political level, but also at public level. A lot of obstacles. But then with my discussion with those who were working at the political level, the men, it's very interesting to see that they don't mainstream the knowledge. So it's really, really important to bring capacity building, to have specific discussions, to empower men to help into this process, but also about women, also about other vulnerable groups, So the lack of knowledge, as we said before, is really, really the key to fix. And this has to be done with the capacity building activities, I believe. And I always propose to invest in internal programs. So at political level, we do internal programs, and then how to do that, because it's good to put women aside and to empower them. But if we only do that, we risk that men, we will never understand what we are doing, and it will be seen as a threat rather than inclusive dimension that benefits all of us. And in some countries, I have to make a recommendation that to have men in doing this capacity building, because only at the beginning with other men, they can really pay attention of the discussion and wanted to discuss the topic. So it's quite difficult.
Yeah. Let me just add something before you go. Yeah, you see, in gender-based violence work here in Uganda, there was a time when it was at its best, and they would just get women, take them for a training. A man should not beat you. Are we together? So they've just told you a man should not beat you. The first thing you enter the house, you tell him, you are not supposed to beat me, and then he starts beating you much worse than before. Are we together? So it needs, in other words, in these gender, the gaps that we have in most of these policies is the strengthening or the capacity building for women should be for them, strengthening them to work with men. The strengthening of men should be for them to work with the women. And then, then it will work. But for so many of these things and for so many of the different mindsets that people have, they are still a limiting factor for these things to work. And as there are continuously projects coming up and getting swallowed up in this negativity, and therefore not having important results. But we continue to stride forward and continue to reinvent strategies to ensure that this can work.
And I think you are both very eloquently illustrating the difference between linear thinking and systems thinking, right? So Lawrence, what you were just saying is that, and also Barbara, it's exactly that. It's that difference between thinking of interventions linearly and, you know, address only women, and think systemically. You need to address women, you need to address men. You not only need to talk directly about gender dynamics, but also family, household responsibilities. What does it mean? Work responsibilities. What's the whole ecosystem that involves men and women? Where are the interactions? Where are the points of conflict? It's a completely different intervention. Sorry, Fede, I saw you raise your hand.
Yeah, thank you. It was indeed related to Lauren's comment. Actually, I had a generic follow-up question also on Barbara's comment regarding whether you have seen, indeed, you mentioned a bit from your experience that instead of focusing on a policy in which you do like trainings only like for women, but you already shared that, like whether there is a way for empowering like old, like for instance related to agriculture, right, like women's like taking care of the household. How can we empower, like how can we don't want to use the word safeguards, but like how to I am missing the word in English, but how to I cannot express myself, to like give not only preserve, but like can I say that in Spanish, perhaps for Barbara? Sí, por ejemplo, cómo se puede hacer que hay un empoderamiento de las mujeres desde el punto de vista del household keeping.
Okay, so empowering women from a responsibilities and household duties, and yes.
I think we need to really understand each other. We need to understand the role of the woman and how is it feasible that women start participating in other roles, understanding that they have a lot of burden. Okay, so the men have to understand that and has to respect it. And this is very difficult. It's very cultural. It's very rooted. So we cannot do it overnight, and we cannot do it through one training. You see, but but that's why we need to be all together. It's really a process, and we really need to understand what we are willing to give up and what we are going, so it's really understanding. It's about love. It's showing love and respect. So it's really understanding, discussing very deeply about the difficulties that women have to grow. And then what the men are willing to do, because but the beautiful thing is that some men are already in certain positions to do much more. And for me, that's why I always recommend to work with those, because they know how to speak to the men as well, but of course not only to be men, also to be women. And another thing that I want to say, in my experience, what I observe, but this is my personal observation, when I go to countries where women are already in a political party, I have seen women that are invisible and women who are visible. Self-confidence is really, really important. And when a woman shows self-confidence, others can see it as well, you see? But when you push in the direction of forcing things and you are not confident, it could go against you. So many dimensions that we have to really to take into account. But I think it's, as what you said before, is really bringing all together, understanding who is where, and strategically thinking how to take it from that point to more. But it's complex. It's complex, but it's beautiful at the same time. I think it's a moment, and I really enjoyed, Lawrence, your intervention, because when I hear that a man understand all this already, it's really so. It's really beautiful. Thank you so much, because it's not a fight against women and men. No, absolutely, it's really understanding that we all matter, and maybe there is a way, but we have to discuss it. And as I said, gender is important, because when we look into who is being behind this woman, politically speaking, it's very clear, but also in in some key positions. But also we have all the vulnerable groups. We cannot forget that are invisible. So when I go to countries, I also see disabled people have a lot of barriers, a lot of them. LGBT people in many countries are not even recognized, so they are invisible. And so how, my question is, how we can ensure that we will identify all the vulnerable groups, and how will help them to take part of these processes? And then how we can ensure that the other stakeholders gain knowledge and respect, and including them, and really understand that this is important for the country, because we will represent also in the measure that we want to take in or implement.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you very much to both of you for such a comprehensive, and to you as well, Federica, such a comprehensive understanding of gender and social inclusion, and very much embedded into this systems view. So, just to conclude, and then we can go for a break and come back. The idea of this exercise is actually to try to see gender and social inclusion from that systemic perspective of, how is gender and social inclusion? So we're talking about other groups as well, like LGBT and disabilities, even ethnicity, and any other group that we consider part of a multi-stakeholder collaboration in your own context. What are the inclusion and exclusion dynamics? How is that showing up? Then looking at equality and equity. So what are the actions and mechanisms in place to bring more equality, to bring more equity? But also, and very importantly, because I do think this is a point that sometimes we forget, especially in multi-stakeholder collaborative processes, and especially in the context of international organizations like UNDP, what are the intrinsic barriers and how much we can actually push those barriers. And we've had experiences where we come with a certain westernized view of how equality and equity should look like in a multi-stakeholder collaboration, but actually clashing with the social and local norms that have a limit to what can be challenged at a certain given point in a certain context. So all of this is really, I think, the sort of suggestion of looking at this. Sorry, Manda, I could see you were raising your hand.
I wanted comments on the previous slide. So I think we have to include in the social inclusion, we have to include the diverse voices or comments or reviews from a woman, not only but also marginalized groups as well as. And I think we can create the power dynamics by creating the inclusive environment to women participating to decision-making processes. And also adding to, I want to add another point of that. It's that when we are discussing some decisions or regulations, we need to include the gender disaggregated data and analysis to inclusion of the woman in general. So that's it.
Yes, thank you very much. And certainly very relevant what you mentioned. And many of the projects that we work on have that protocol in place, that way of thinking as well, in terms of looking at data analysis and really leveraging on real data to move the gender and social inclusion agenda. And to that point, Manda, actually, as part of the videos that we shared as pre-work, there's 2 videos on Scala's case study of how they are doing gender and social inclusion, which actually speak a lot to the points that you were mentioning. So yeah, maybe worthwhile watching them if you haven't done so yet, or for anyone in the group. So yes, thank you very much. And sorry, one last question from Federica. Have you ever used an intersectional approach in any project you took part of? That's a wonderful question, Federica. I think intersectionality is actually super interesting and relevant to the work in multi-stakeholder collaborative processes, because usually we see it in the different stakeholder groups. Yeah, I don't know if Lawrence or Barbara or even Manda, if there's anything, or Uchi, if there's anything that you want to share about that based on your experience.
Okay,
I am waiting for you to talk. Just to tell you that in 5 minutes, unfortunately, I have to leave because I always have meetings at 11 o'clock. But I have 5 minutes to hear you.
I don't know if I understand very well the intersectional approach, because I don't know if it looks at, I don't know, can she just explain it a bit? Yes, so that I can then see how to go to it. Yes.
Yeah, Fede, would you like to explain a little bit about intersectionality?
So yeah, thank you, Lawrence. Yes, intersectionality approach is when you are taking into consideration, and please, Barbara, correct me if I'm wrong about the definition, when you take into consideration different, let's say, I don't want to call them variables, but like you take into consideration gender, gender, like ethnicity, and other type of way of defining like a human being, right? And with an intersectional approach, like for instance, also like social identity, etc. So you take, when you're doing a project, you take into consideration these different aspects, while for instance, I don't know, as we were talking, like you are creating a training around gender, but then you also take into consideration like power dynamics, you take into consideration like person, ethnicity, etc.
Yeah.
Please, Barbara or Uchi.
Yes.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you.
So yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
So because you see what happens is on some work that I've done with the Ministry of Finance, we had to look at that, because you see we are looking at the entire country, and as a country, because of number one, of the different cultures, and then the differences, of course, of the people that we look at. For us in that work, we had mixed approaches of that kind. For example, in a place, we would do leaders alone, do women alone, then do male alone. And then after we've done that and corrected those issues, then we bring them together, select representatives from all, and then do them together. Because why we were doing this was we were trying to avoid information, especially being said in different groups, and that cannot be accepted by the others. Like, for example, if you are looking at how women, what they are saying about the work, what men are saying about the work and even how the support issues are working, and then the leaders. So I think I've worked with that, with the poverty status report on the Ministry of Finance, and then working some work for Plan International, where I started as an M&E person. We also did that. So we collect data at community level, then come to the leadership, and then go to the district. Then once we are making presentations at the district, we pick representatives from all the levels of data collection, and then we share and then give them opportunities. For example, if we made a presentation at community level, then we say, yes, someone can supplement it. So you allow to bring them together and these things to come out, and then would then derive actions that go back to complete that. So both at gender and both at different levels in the implementation work.
Thank you, Lawrence. That's fantastic. And yeah, to Federica's point, this idea of intersectionality is also a very systems-based approach, because it looks at how those attributes from the diversity iceberg overlap. So when you talk about diversity, you don't just talk about women or men, you talk about women, you talk about young women, you talk about, so there's the intersectionality of gender and age. From the Western region or from the central region of Uganda, that's place of origin. So that's another layer. And you know, this is very interesting. When you start overlapping these diversity qualities, it becomes more nuanced and more detailed. So thank you very much for sharing your experience. Yes, Uchi, we'll go to Uchi, and then we're going to take a break and come back for the final section of the deep dive. Yes, Barbara, thank you so much. We'll see you next week.
If you give me just 1 second, I
Yes.
would like to say that in my experience, this is very hard to do it well.
Yes.
So I have done meetings with vulnerable groups, with all of them, and to identify the barriers. And that was a beautiful experience. And what we noticed is that when you do that exercise, gender is a cross-cutting issue. In all vulnerable groups, the woman of that vulnerable group is much more affected. So that's what it comes really the discovery of the of how much women are affected in all vulnerable groups. But when it comes to integrate this dimension into discussions of specific topics, in my view, and that's what we are discussing today, is not well done, because we lack this previous process of identification of vulnerable groups having the right data. And also, in my view, we need to have a platform or a space where vulnerable groups can go and check whether they are well represented, because also it's a question of representation. And sometimes indigenous people, for instance, don't feel represented by the organization they are representing them, or they want to represent in them. So it's many dimensions that has to be clarified before. And this, we're trying to do this, but we're not getting there yet. But that's why I'm here, and I really appreciate that we are discussing it, because it needs to be strengthened. Sorry that I took the floor, but I wanted to share, but I have to leave. Sorry about it.
That's okay. Thank you so much, Barbara, and see you next week.
See you next week. Have a wonderful discussion. I will follow you in the recording.
Thank you. And Uchi, yes, over to you. Thank you.
So thank you very much. You know, the issue of intersectionality is very important, but it's being considered when they're designing the project, because when you have different class status within the community, in designing the project, you specify that at least we have a certain number of men that should be the participant. For example, if you are forming a group of 30, you know very well that when you go to the community, men will dominate. So in designing the project, you then specify that now the project specify that women should be 15 within the group of 30. Men should be 15 in order to balance the number of both gender. Then when you specify like this, they know the men will not be dominated. And again, sometimes you include who are the real farmers. We want those that are into farming process. Can a woman, do you have a plot? Do you have a plot of land? Yes or no? Will your husband allow you to work? Are you working? And then you comprise this, you take such indicators and make up the participant of such project. If not, based on the custom tradition, sometimes men used to dominate. But when the funders or those that are implementing, they have simplified that this is what they need to take, and it's really very important. That is why the sectionality is very important, being on the statute, on the class, on the sex. So that is my own contribution. Thank you.
Thank you, Uchi. Thank you very much. And it's been a pleasure to hear you both and hear obviously from Manda and Barbara as well. We're going to take a 10-minute break because I'm conscious that we've been connected for quite a while. So we will come back 5 past the hour. Please don't disconnect the Zoom. Let me just reopen the presentation so that we can continue after this break. And just to say, for some reason, you're just not able to see. Okay, let me stop and share again. Yeah, screen. There it is. Yeah. So just to share very briefly that if you want to see more details about gender equality, you've got this scorecard, flashcard. Gender equality is one of the 10 key principles of effective collaborative action. So you can go back to the handout that we distributed last week, where you can see for gender equality in the context of multi-stakeholder collaboration, what are examples of limiting conditions, what are examples of tools and practices to advance, what are examples of signals of change, and of course, as always, add your own to this toolkit. Now we're going to move into effective communication. And as we shared previously, effective communication is one of the 4 essential practices, as well as one of the 10 key principles and for effective collaborative action. And in the context of ECA, effective collaborative action, we define effective communication as paying attention to, have we lost? I think we've lost Lawrence and, yeah, okay. Let's wait then.
Yeah.
Excellent, thank you. So yeah, so just as we were saying, you know, effective communication is one of the key essential practices, as well as one of the 10 key principles of effective collaborative action. And when we talk about effective communication, we talk about how do we make sure that we pay ongoing attention to how communication is done at a personal, collective, and systems level, because communication on an ongoing basis and clear communication is understood to be vital for building trust and for aligning stakeholders on common motivations, as well as communicating the efforts of any multi-stakeholder collaboration. And yes, the idea on effective communication is to work at 3 levels, so personal, collective, and system, and also not only in terms of how we portray and convey messages, but also how do we listen? How do we apply deep listening principles to make sure that we are also opening to receiving what other partners or facilitators or stakeholder groups want or need to share with us. This is again going back to the flashcards and the 10 key principles. Some examples of what are the limiting conditions that we can find. So what gets in the way of good collaboration and good communication. Examples of tools and practices to advance. So there's a guidance on effective communication that we can share. There's the 4 voices of collaborative innovation, 4 levels of listening, which refers to the practice of deep listening, using tools like storytelling, artwork, different ways of understanding that there are different ways of communicating. And so how do we cater for this diversity? And then we have the signals of change. As we said before, you can go through this on your own time and decide which one might be useful for the purposes of your own project. Now, one particular tool and practice that I want to share with you today and that we're going to use and practice a little bit with is what's called the cultural mapping. So the cultural mapping comes from the work of a lady called Erin Meyer. And she's basically done a very thorough research looking at different elements of national culture and how they translate into what we call polarities, which is basically equality from one extreme to the other. Yeah, so you can see that she's mapped these attributes, these cultural differences in terms of 10 dimensions, or not, sorry, 3, 5, 8 dimensions. So we have communicating, evaluating, leading, deciding, trusting, disagreeing, scheduling, and persuading. And Fede, please, if you can add the handout to the chat, that would be great. We are adding a handout with the definitions of each one of these dimensions and the corresponding polarity. So for communication, for example, we have low context and high context. For evaluating, we have direct negative feedback, indirect negative feedback. For leading, we have egalitarian and hierarchical. So the invitation now is to take a few minutes to read that handout so that you can get familiarized with the dimensions, with the definitions and the polarities. And then we can have a brief conversation around how do you see this polarities manifesting in your work, and Lawrence, you were talking about earlier on, the differences between the Western culture and the Central culture. So I'd be curious to hear, how do you see those differences when it comes to communication from the perspective of the dimensions that we just talked? And Uchi, from your side as well, what are the differences maybe internally in different community groups that you worked with? And as the question is offering here, where do you see your stakeholder groups positioned? So let's take a few minutes, maybe 5 minutes, and please raise your hand on Zoom once you're ready and you've read the handout so that we know that we can continue with the conversation. And this is a very helpful visual as well to explain and to show to different stakeholders how, communication is very nuanced, and it's not, from our, there might be a lot of assumptions that we make around what is the best way to communicate with each other. And so seeing the differences in approaches can be very helpful to spark that conversation. Now, for the final section of today, we're going to move into applying ECA and the different building blocks from the perspective of the questions that guide our action. And so for each one of the components of effective collaborative action, and this was shared in the video, so I'm not going to go through a lot of detail here today. But just to remind us that in the videos, you can see how for each component, there are questions that can guide our action in terms of implementing effective collaborative action from two dimensions, I would say: the process, the multi-stakeholder collaboration process, and then from a facilitation point of view, which is much more about developing that sense of self-awareness and noticing and paying attention and developing intention in how we show up as conveners and how we design those processes and what are the things that we are bringing in consciously or unconsciously. And today we've talked about that a lot through the slides of diversity, inclusion, the microaggressions, all of these micro inequities, all of these things that might escape our regular awareness, right? So we have the questions from the 4 building blocks. We have the questions from the essential practices, and we have the questions from the stakeholder actions and backbone support, and some guiding questions as well for the 10 key principles. And so I'm not going to go through the details of these questions because you probably you've seen the videos already. And so the idea is now to do a bit of to take some time to do some individual work, and then we're not going to do the breakout groups. We're just going to do some sense making together. And this individual work is, the idea is for us to use our Google Slides. And let me just go back to the Google Slides. And you will see that there's some instructions as well. So the same instructions that I'm sharing are in your Google workspace. But basically the slide that we need to work on is this one. And the suggestion is to think about the most relevant building block and the most relevant essential practice for your case study, and to write down some notes on what the current situation is, where you would like that particular building block or that particular current situation to be, and what are the actions that you can take to move that further, using the guiding questions as a trigger to think through these 3 buckets of current situation, where I would like this to be, and actions. And in your own Google Slides, you can access the questions as well for reference, yeah? So we're going to take around 5 minutes, 5-7 minutes to do this. Please, as mentioned as well, raise your hand when you're done. And then we're going to have a final conversation, final sense making, and we will probably just wrap up the session and give you back a few minutes of your time today, given that, we've managed to go through these elements quite quickly. So we will probably finish earlier today. So let's do that if you agree and if that's okay. Lawrence, and are you able to access your Google Slides?
For now, I cannot access them, but I'm going to do it after the sessions once I get. Okay. Yes.
Sounds good. And Uchi, are you able to access your?
Yes. I'm working on it.
Okay, fantastic. So how about then, if Lawrence, if you're going to do it after the session, shall we then maybe use the time that we have left together, and as I said, maybe we can finish the session earlier, and maybe just reflect very quickly on if you have any questions or any sense of where you would like to place your focus on your individual case studies. And then we can just wrap up and give you back some of your time for the well, I guess it's early afternoon already there, or late morning.
No, it's afternoon already.
Yes, it's afternoon already. So yeah, so we can give you back some time of your early afternoon. So let me share, let's do that. I think it's going to be easier. So let me share this screen and then we can go through it. So yeah, Lawrence, in terms of building block and essential practice, do you have a sense of where you would like to focus for your particular case study?
Yes. So building block the current situation. Of course, what happened was I also need to clarify that the kind of project that I used is a project that we are working on. We are designing, for which we are preparing to start reaching out to a number of funders. So you do realize that most of the thing that I'm doing is the plans or things that we think about. Now, in terms of the building blocks, I am.
Let me go. There you understand
yes,
this. Co-create the approach, take collaborative action, and learn and adapt.
Yeah. So as of now, we are at a level where we are trying to understand the systems. Why am I saying we are at the level where we are trying to understand the systems? Is we are designing this project to kind of look at the early issues of attitudes of youth towards agriculture that are predominantly growing negative here in Uganda. So we have selected around 30 schools who we are discussing with to find a way how they fit into this. And so we are looking at some schools that already think about having some of these agricultural projects on the ground. And then we are trying to say, okay, for those who don't have any, and then this is what we want to do. Let's have some small gardens and to ensure that these children and school-going people for primary school and secondary school can live around gardens and then have gardens in the school, and then where we shall have talks with them to try and explain to them, because incidentally in Africa, younger people are continuously saying no, because of the computerized formats of life and the way they are coming up, they are negatively not interested in the agriculture that we do. So for us, as of now, we are understanding the system, and then we move into the co-creating of our approach to fit it into the situation that is on the ground. And of course, as we do that, we have so we are at a process where we are doing a lot of learning. Of course, we, like I'm saying, we are touching so many blocks at the same time, because through the meetings, you do understand that we begin to learn and say, okay, this is what we wanted to do. Some of these schools actually are not in looking at, they had not thought of these gardens. So if we have to do some of these, if they don't even have space, let us do backyard gardens. And then we are also, of course, looking at collaborative actions where we are saying, okay, so even if though we have schools of international curriculums, schools of local curriculums, let us find a way to create a system that can work with all of those. So that's just in general how the place at which we are.
Thanks a lot, Lawrence, for sharing. And just in terms of the essential practices, is there any one in particular? I mean, I take from what you've shared that inclusion and working with power seems a very important one. Is that the one that you want to focus on, or how do you see that?
Yes, inclusion, of course, and working with power. And the challenge that the reason why we focus on that is, number one, inclusion is becoming very important for so many for so many donors or funding organizations. But we have got challenges of power. Challenges of power being that the Ministry of Education can wake up and stifle a program that has lots of long-term benefits for the nation, not just for schools, but for the broader issues. So that's why you saw I have lots of relations on trying to look at inclusion and power to find a way how we can be inclusive for purposes of attracting funding, and number two, for purposes of doing it correctly to ensure that it actually works.
Yeah, fantastic.
Yes.
Thank you very much again for sharing all of the insights into your work, and we're learning so much from you. Thank you so much. And Uchi, from your side, do you have a sense of which building block you would like to focus on?
Yes, from here on my work, I wrote like co-designing and awareness creation with the stakeholders on the importance of the project, because co-designing as a building block create a way for people to believe that the project is their own and is being built on their faith needs. So when you bring in into this practice in launching the project, they take the project as their own. Some even bring their own and resources that could be technical resources, and even some bring in material resources, because when you involve them in designing of the project, they are very happy. They take it as their own project, that they are not being neglected. And it happens when the project have just been introduced and then they are not aware of it. They look at the way of even rejecting the project, even if it benefits them and it's not their faith needs. They find it very difficult. And that is the current situation building block. And where I would like, where this will be at the community level. Hello?
Yes.
Are you listening? Am I on track?
Yes, we're listening here. Yeah. We're here. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. Am I on track?
Yes, you are, definitely. So we are going through, the idea is to go through the 4 building blocks, and then obviously whenever you're ready, you can let us know and we can look at the essential practices and which one of the essential practices you would like to focus on.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
It's all right. And then, yes, and then the collaboration is also very important. This collaboration within the stakeholders in involvement and the institutional process. There is a collaboration, because when you want to at least build on the projects, you have to bring in the institution, because they know the indicator, the baseline. That is where you bring in the government, the local, the states, and even the community focal persons, I mean the community leaders in for more collaboration. Because when we talk about the community, we also include some of these institutions that belong to the community, which was most of time the religion. The religion is there, the traditional. There are some of the key institutions that plays a very good role in informing the people of such a particular project. It could be most of the times it could be in churches, could be in mosques, could be in traditional setting, and it brings a lot of awareness. And the understanding the system is also very important because the dynamics that are involved are really very important. Understanding the system also has to at least also has to do with at least the environmental setup is also very important. The ecology that is involved, how the calendar planning, understanding the system, the calendar planning also has to do with this, the seasonal projects, the amounts of maybe the rainfall, if it is a rainfall, the participation, the production, or even if it is irrigated, the system patterning the environment involved is also really very important. And also learning to adapt to the system. In as much as the participants live in the community, they also have to borrow some of the ideas from the project designers so that the project will not fail. And then each and every of these participants, they have to learn from each other in order to adapt to the system so that the project will go as been planned. And sometimes it's very important. Sometimes the organizers of the project, most especially, they don't really even understand the language. That is the communication is also very important. They bring in the interpreter. So the interpreter also, the person that brings the project and does not understand the language, try to adapt the system of the community of trying to understand what the community interprets, and then the person to speak and the interpreter interpret to the community, and both of them adapt the system. Those things are really very important when you want to build up on the project.
Thank you very much, Uchi. And certainly all of the 4 building blocks are important in their own right. And as you very well highlight, there's a place for understanding the system. There's a place for co-creating the approach. There's a space also for looking at how to take action collaboratively and learn and adapt. So it's very interesting to hear you and Lawrence speak to how you see this being integrated in practice in your own environments and setups and projects. So thank you so much for sharing. Very, very appreciated.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I'm gonna now move us back then to the final closing for today before we move to obviously next week is going to be our last session, and we're going to focus there on facilitation and exploring what are the key ideas and things that we need to bear in mind when it comes to designing, convening, and facilitating multi-stakeholder processes. But before we get into what's ahead of us next week, just closing for today, a quick checkout. What did you learn? What did you enjoy? What would you like more of? And what else, as we always do in these sessions? And we'll give you some minutes back for you to hopefully stretch your legs, relax before you continue with your day. So, yeah. Lawrence, any comments from your side? What for your checkout today?
Yes. Number one, of course, in the discussion, of course, I've continued to grow in my understanding of gender. I've not done gender for too long. I started through the trainings in 2020 and continuously when we have discussions with the likes of Barbara and Manda, when they say something, you continuously learn and evolve. And of course, I will continue to say this. I enjoy these sessions because of the fact that they allow sharing. Most online sessions, I think we were with you, Sole, in the session on Tuesday. They want, because of the time construct, they don't allow for sharing. And most of, when you people don't share, there is not a lot of fun who are just in there to listen to what they had to say and step out. So that's what I like about this deep dive, and I hope it can continue. And we also, of course, I would also happy to share and meet other people who have gone through these sessions before, because number one, learning doesn't stop, and there are quite so many opportunities you can gain by broadening the network you can access. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lawrence. And we really appreciate, as much as you appreciate the openness for sharing, we appreciate your active involvement and your proactivity to share, because we really designed these sessions intentionally to create that space, and we believe that's where the true learning happens. So thank you for taking on the invitation, and the same for you, Uchi, for very actively participating and sharing and being part of the ongoing conversation. So yeah, over to you, Uchi, as well.
Yeah, I've learned a lot. I've learned about diversity, but the main focus is what is common about us. What is common about the meeting, the project, and I discovered that what is common is for the humanity within the humanity to prevail. That is helping people to have their own livelihood. And what I enjoy most is when they mention it in intersectionality, because it's so very important in when you are dealing with the social life of the people. Intersectionality has to do with at least playing people within their class status and ranking them. And if you are designing a project and you consider this, at least it will be very important, because the issue of gender plays a lot in Africa. And if the project designer then put some specific aims and objectives to meet all the project, trying to even to quantify the number of such a statute class will be included. It will help a lot in the implementation of the project, especially pertaining the gender, because when you bring the projects, some traditional and cultural now overshadow, and some of the participants find it very difficult to in the project. Even the young men, the youths, you cannot only base on the women or the men inclusion pertaining the gender or the role that they play, even the youths. Now, there had been some of these arguments that sustainability development goals, as they can say, that is sustainable now. They are talking about the future. So the future, how are we going to do? Youth have to be included. There is the youth between ages of 18, even the primary school peoples that are even 12, because they are the one to sustain the project ahead. So such class of trying to know each of the statue that will be placed and we make the project successful, it's really very, I really enjoyed that. And what would I would like more is that I would like such programs. And I would like to be included in subsequent programs as well. And even the implementation, the action if I found worthy to do it, even in Africa, in Nigeria, I should be included. That is what I will like more. I will be pleased with that. And also, what is when we wanted to work on we wanted to go on exercise, my own slide 10 was not working. I don't know. I've tried to copy in, it wasn't working up till now. Yes, but when I went to 12, the 12 had worked, but 10 did not work up till now. When I want to copy the note in, it will just go off the sticky notes up till now.
Yeah.
So if you can rectify it. So thank you. That is what I have for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you both, Lawrence and Uchi. I mean, for me, it's just such a learning opportunity to hear from both of you. Also to hear from Federica as well, your experience, your learnings, many of the things and the topics that we don't necessarily have time to talk about and dwell into, Federica, on our day-to-day basis. So thank you as well for joining the conversation. For next week, we will, as usual, send an email with the pre-work videos and make sure that you watch them before we come. It's our last session, but as we said, we are going to have an alumni session after this program is over, hopefully in August, if all goes well. I mean, considering that August is a bit of a tricky month sometimes for some people, so it might be August or September. But the idea is to have a space where we come back together and, you know, maybe talk about a different topic that we haven't covered, but equally to just share, as we've been doing so far, the things that we find in the work as we go about in our own contexts and spaces, trying to do multi-stakeholder collaboration and systems change. So thank you very much to both of you. I really look forward to seeing you next week. And don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions or if you need anything between now and next week.